In analyzing the American election, ordinarily, the Republican Party is much more clever in terms of framing the catch-all phrase. And starting with the Reagan period and then employed by many Republicans running for office, they framed truly a generation of a political debate. And that effectively the Republicans coined it as less government, less taxes, more freedom. And no matter what we Democrats did, ultimately it came down to less government, less taxes, more freedom. This year, however, inadvertently, purposely or not, I actually think the Democrats have hit it out of the ballpark when it comes to framing the issue. And Vice President Biden did it not too long ago when he was asked, sum up President Obama's first term, sum up why Americans ought to re-elect President Obama. Vice President Biden said, Osama bin Laden is dead, General Motors is alive. Ladies and gentlemen, that's about, in its most simplistic form, what the election will be about. Ambassador Eisenstadt and Mr. Haas very ably described why the American people will vote on the economy. And the election will be determined by the economy as opposed to national security or foreign affairs. And they're right. Ambassador Eisenstadt, I think, correctly pointed out the daunting statistic for the president in terms of no president has been reelected with an unemployment rate greater than 8%. But there actually is an underside to this story, which I think deserves to be stated. And that is the reason also in part that national security and foreign policy will not be a major part of this election is that President Obama actually gets very high marks from the American people in terms of national security and foreign policy. President Obama polls far better in terms of national security than he does the economy. And it isn't because the Republicans are solely focused on the economy that this election will be about the economy or that the American people care most about the economy. It's that the criticisms of President Obama regarding national security largely have fallen flat. Why is that? Because Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. The American people instinctively understand that what President Obama did in terms of the decision-making and the bold action regarding Osama bin Laden was impressive. They instinctively understand that eliminating roughly 2/3 of the leadership of al-Qaeda, that's a good thing for America. Americans who are in fact focused on the economy and jobs and health care and their schools essentially have concluded that the way President Obama handled Libya and the result was positive. And while Americans are appalled by what they see on television regarding Syria, they're not itching to be in a third war, in a third Muslim nation. And while people, yes, have concerns regarding Iraq and the future of Iraq and whether all of the death, destruction, and price that America and others have paid in Iraq will ultimately be sacrificed or turned out to be a worthy cause, Americans, by and large, are happy to be out of Iraq. And yes, Americans are happy that while President Obama, as Mr. Haas said, increased troops by 33,000 more Americans to stabilize the situation, Americans are happy that will be done in 2014. So yes, the economy will determine the election, but national security in this case actually works as a positive, even though it's not a determining factor for President Obama. Because ordinarily, the Republican candidate will have stronger credibility on national security issues, but that will not be the case this year. I will offer 3 observations in terms of this election, and no, they're not nonpartisan. I am biased. But I think there are 3 reasons, and the election will be exceedingly close, no doubt. The electoral count, the popular vote, will be determined, no doubt, by a relatively small number of people. But I think there are three ultimately fundamental problems that Governor Romney will not be able to overcome. Just like Ambassador Eisenstadt rightfully pointed out, the 8% number regarding unemployment, there's a similar fact that should be zeroed in on. And that is, given the Electoral College and the advantage that Democrats have in big states such as California and New York and Illinois, which essentially vote Democratic, and the only large state that votes reliably Republican, of course, is Texas. Ohio is the critical state, amongst others. But Ohio, it is essentially impossible for a Republican candidate to win the presidency without winning Ohio. And that determination 3 years ago, roughly, when President Obama chose to bail out the automobile industry and Governor Romney took exception to the bailout program, essentially cemented Ohio for President Obama. And it will ultimately be extremely difficult for Governor Romney to overcome in a state that is disproportionately affected by the automobile industry, those mathematics. The second reason that Governor Romney will be unable, ultimately, in my humble view, to win the election is the immigration issue. And during the Republican primaries, in order to establish his conservative credentials against what was seemingly more conservative opponents in the Republican primaries, Governor Romney took a more strident or more right-wing position than even Newt Gingrich or Governor Perry of Texas regarding the immigration issue. And President Obama, in the past week, made an executive order which implemented, in effect, what we call the DREAM Act, which enables young people in America who entered America illegally but have followed certain rules and have gained certain credentials to stay in America. And if the polling remains as it is during the first week, by a tremendous margin, better than 2-1, Americans agree with the action that President Obama took, and Governor Romney is painted in a very difficult corner. The third reason why President Obama will be reelected, there are gender gaps in American politics, and Governor Romney, no doubt, will enjoy a gender gap amongst American men, and President Obama will no doubt enjoy a gender gap with American women. But I would respectfully suggest that the gender gap with respect to women will be greater than the gender gap with respect to men, and that too was cemented somewhat during the Republican primaries, when there were 4 Republicans left, and led by former Senator Santorum, the Republican Party engaged in a very high-profile debate regarding contraception and the role of women in society that did not comport with the consensus view amongst American women. And no doubt Governor Romney will make inroads and try to modify that. But ultimately, I'm afraid from his perspective, it was too much. Let me get to the substance of foreign policy, and I agree with Ambassador Eisenstadt and Mr. Haas that to a large degree there will be continuity, whether President Obama is reelected or if Governor Romney becomes president. But I think there are, in fact, certain points that need to be made, and this I will say specifically in response or in concert with my good friend, Ambassador Gold. Ambassador Gold talked about Iran. And let me just take a step back. Last year, I had the privilege of addressing this conference, and all we talked about was the upcoming Black September, the political tsunami that was about to happen that would put Israel in a very precarious position. Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen for a variety of reasons, but significantly, it didn't happen because President Obama went to the United Nations and essentially dismantled, in effect, any type of consensus in support of a unilateral declaration of Palestinian state. And he did so using a variety of tools, not the least of which essentially was referred to by our European friend, which is a good bit of the world actually seeks to engage with President Obama because they agree in his policies. Ambassador Gold talked about America's policy in Iran, and I don't want to mischaracterize his position, but essentially I think it would be fair to say the failure of engagement with Iran to reach its intended result. And I would respectfully differ, not from the point of view that engagement with Iran has thwarted Iran's nuclear program. Of course it has not. But what engagement with Iran has ushered in is in fact the ability to implement the most widespread, comprehensive set of sanctions on Iran in the history of the world. Does anyone think for 1 minute that the European Union, that the European states would be entering into an oil boycott of Iran if there was not a policy of engagement first, which showed the European public and equally important European leaders that through diplomacy alone, Iran will not do what a responsible nation should do? Does anybody think for 1 minute that the issue of admiralty insurance, which has become so critical in terms of Iran's condition, that the companies in London or the company in China would have stopped writing admiralty insurance so that Iranian ships can no longer port in any port in the world if America didn't lead a process of engagement with Iran so as to show the world that Iran actually is the problem candidate here, not America, not Europe, not Israel? And most importantly, with all due respect to everyone here in Israel and for anybody who doubts the president, if and when the option of a military campaign relative to Iran is required, and the president has given his word publicly and privately in interviews and in speeches that the United States of America will not tolerate a nuclear Iran, does anyone doubt the fact that an American-led military action against Iran is far more credible with our own people, but also with peoples all over the world because of the policy of engagement? And because of the policy of engagement, should we have to face Iran in a nuclear confrontation, it'll look more like the first Gulf War, where President Bush assembled an extraordinary coalition of nations. That's what this will look like. Because of President Obama's policy of engagement, should we have to confront Iran, we'll do it with our European allies. We'll do it with the British. We'll do it with the French, even with the new French government. We'll do it with support from our German allies. And we'll do it with support from a vast majority of the Arab nations as well. And that is why the policy of engagement is the right policy for America, the right policy for Israel, and it's also why Governor Romney, should he become president, will follow it, because it is the one that makes the most sense and gives America its strongest card. One last comment, if I may. Not to re-debate an issue over and over again, but with respect to President Obama's speeches last May, the notion that somehow he changed or reformed or retreated or modified his position from the first speech to the second speech does not comport with the speech itself. The president outlined as a basis of negotiation between the Israelis and the Palestinians that the basis of negotiations should be the 1967 lines with agreed territorial swaps. The issue of whether or not the 1967 lines are defensible or indefensible is a false issue relative to what the president said. Because the president of the United States, President Obama, just like every other president who has dealt with this issue, has never thought for 1 minute that the 1967 lines is where we end up. And the formulation that President Obama offered, if it were in fact implemented through negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, would result in roughly between 75% and 80% of those Israelis who live outside of the international lines of the Green Line would be incorporated within the internationally recognized borders of the State of Israel. An extraordinary victory for a Jewish, democratic state of Israel. And one last thing. We often don't hear about all the other things that President Obama said in those speeches. President Obama has talked more about a Jewish Israel than any other president. And also what seemed not to resonate here amongst many Israeli friends was the language that President Obama used in defining Israel's right to a protracted or a necessary presence in the Jordanian Valley that was very similar to language that Prime Minister Netanyahu had used just a few days earlier, recognizing Israel's security interest in the Jordanian Valley and making certain that Israel not be asked to withdraw from that presence until the Palestinian forces, the international forces, or whatever formula was devised worked, that it was accountable. So I just want to close by simply saying I agree it'll be continuity, and that continuity should actually be applauded. Thank you very much.